Part 2. The Story of Us, When Progress Became a Problem. Picture a man standing in a field somewhere in rural Eastern Europe, around the year 1900. He has never seen a light bulb. He has never heard of penicillin. He plows by hand, eats what he grows, and if his child falls ill with pneumonia, as children often did, there is almost nothing to be done but wait and pray. 1 in 5 children born that year will not live to see their 5th birthday. Now fast forward one lifetime. That same man's grandson is an American physician. Infant mortality has fallen below 1%. Antibiotics exist, clean water flows from a tap, a child with pneumonia goes home healthy after a weekend in hospital. By every measurable standard, that is an extraordinary triumph. And yet, something else is happening too. Something the data is only beginning to reveal. Because even as we conquered the old killers, we were quietly creating new ones. Diseases our ancestors simply did not have. Conditions so common today that we've started to accept them as normal, even inevitable. They are not inevitable. And understanding why they exist, that's what this part of the story is about. Here's the central idea, and it's both simple and unsettling. Our bodies were shaped by millions of years of evolution to live one kind of life, and for the last 12,000 years, in the blink of an evolutionary eye, we have been living a completely different one. Evolution is slow, culture is fast, and the gap between the two is making us sick. Scientists call this evolutionary mismatch. Think of it like a software problem. Your body is running ancient code optimized for a world of scarcity, movement, diverse whole foods, and outdoor living. But the environment that code is running in has been radically updated. The hardware has changed. The old programming doesn't quite fit anymore. The result is a long and growing list of conditions that were rare or non-existent among hunter-gatherers but are now epidemic in industrial societies. Type 2 diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, osteoporosis, many cancers, chronic back pain, flat feet, nearsightedness, tooth decay, anxiety, depression. Not diseases of infection, diseases of mismatch, diseases of abundance. And here's the troubling part. We're not fixing them. We're managing them. There's a name for this too. Dysevolution. A cultural feedback loop where we treat the symptoms of mismatched diseases without ever addressing their root causes. We fill the cavities without eliminating the sugar. We prescribe blood pressure medication without redesigning the sedentary, high-sodium lifestyle that caused the pressure to rise in the first place. The diseases persist. The next generation inherits both the biology and the behavior. The loop continues. The first mistake, farming. To understand how we got here, we need to go back about 12,000 years to what many scientists consider the single most consequential mistake in human history, the invention of agriculture. To be fair, it didn't feel like a mistake at the time. After the Ice Age ended and the climate stabilized, populations of hunter-gatherers began experimenting with cultivating wild plants. In the Levant, along the Jordan River, a culture called the Natufians built permanent villages, crafted art, conducted elaborate burials, and traded across long distances. They were, in some ways, the most sophisticated foragers who ever lived, and they were already beginning to farm. Climate stress, a sudden cold snap called the Younger Dryas, pushed some groups further into cultivation. Wild cereals became domesticated wheat and barley. Wild animals became sheep, goats, pigs. Farming arose independently in at least 6 regions around the world: East Asia, Mesoamerica, the Andes, Africa, New Guinea, and the Middle East. Always the same basic bargain: trade flexibility for productivity, trade movement for settlement, trade variety for yield. The payoff was real. Farming populations doubled every 2,000 years, far faster than hunter-gatherers had ever managed. More food meant more children meant more farmers. Settlements grew into villages, villages into towns, towns into cities. Civilization, with all its art and science and social complexity, became possible. But the costs were staggering. For a start, the food was worse. Hunter-gatherers ate hundreds of different plant and animal species, drawing a rich, varied diet of vitamins, minerals, and proteins. Farmers ate wheat or rice or maize, calorie-rich, storable, reliable, but nutritionally monotonous. Scurvy, pellagra, beriberi, goiter, anemia, deficiency diseases virtually unknown among hunter-gatherers, swept through agricultural populations. Famines, almost non-existent when you can move and adapt, became catastrophic when your entire survival depended on a single crop that a fungus or drought could destroy. The Irish potato famine is only the most famous example of a recurring agricultural disaster. And then there was disease. Dense permanent settlements, surrounded by their own accumulated waste, and filled with domesticated animals living in close quarters, were perfect incubators for infection. Tuberculosis jumped from cattle, measles from cattle and dogs, influenza evolved through waterfowl and barnyard animals, plague spread along trade routes. Over 100 infectious diseases we now call crowd diseases emerged directly from the agricultural lifestyle, diseases that hunter-gatherers living in small mobile bands simply could not sustain. Archaeology confirms the human cost. Skeletal remains from early farming communities around the world show a clear pattern: shorter stature, more bone disease, more dental cavities, more evidence of malnutrition. The farmer worked harder and ate worse than the forager who came before them. Jared Diamond once called farming the worst mistake in human history. It's a provocation, but not an empty one. The Second Revolution. Fast forward to 18th century England. A new revolution is underway, not agricultural this time, but industrial. Steam engines, coal, factories, mass production, cities swelling beyond anything the world had ever seen. The health gains from industrialization were eventually transformative. The discovery of germ theory, Pasteur proving in 1856 that microbes cause disease, unlocked an era of vaccines, antiseptics, antibiotics, and sanitation that saved hundreds of millions of lives. London's Great Sewer System, built after the catastrophic Great Stink of 1858 when the Thames became an open cesspool, became a model for cities worldwide. Infant mortality collapsed. Life expectancy doubled. People grew taller. Europeans today are taller than at any point in the last 40,000 years. Dutch men alone have grown 20 centimeters since 1850. But industrialization also brought a new wave of mismatch. And this time, it was about energy, how we get it and what we do with it. Hunter-gatherers walked 5 to 9 miles a day. Early farmers were physically demanding too, plowing, harvesting, hauling, with physical activity levels close to those of foragers. But the industrial economy systematically automated physical effort out of existence. Cars replaced walking, escalators replaced stairs, desk jobs replaced farm work. Today, the average American walks less than half a kilometer daily. Office workers expend only marginally more energy than if they had stayed in bed. At the same time, the industrial food system made calories cheaper, more abundant, and more engineered than at any point in human history. Sugar, once a rare luxury that a hunter-gatherer might risk a bee sting to obtain, became so cheap and ubiquitous that the average American now consumes over 100 pounds of it per year. Portion sizes doubled, fast food multiplied. Between 1970 and 2000, daily caloric intake among Americans rose by 14%, not because people were hungrier, but because the food was everywhere, cheap, and precisely engineered to override the brain's satiety signals. Our bodies were never designed for this. We evolved to crave sweetness because ripe fruit was a rare, precious energy source. We evolved to love fat and salt because they were scarce and essential. Every one of those cravings made perfect sense on the African savanna. In a world with a fast food restaurant on every corner, those same ancient appetites are slowly killing us. The new diseases. The result of all this, the shift away from movement, the transformation of diet, the isolation of modern sleep and social patterns, is the epidemiological transition. Infectious diseases, the great killers of our ancestors, have retreated. But in their place, non-communicable chronic diseases have surged. Between 1970 and 2010, deaths from infectious disease fell by 17% worldwide. Deaths from chronic disease rose by 30%. We are living longer, but we are spending more of those extra years sick. Type 2 diabetes is appearing in teenagers. Breast cancer rates in the UK nearly doubled in a generation. Crohn's disease, virtually unknown in pre-industrial populations, is rising globally among young people. Rates of childhood obesity have more than tripled since 1980, and the health costs are not distributed equally. Poorer communities with less access to health care, less safe space to exercise, and greater reliance on cheap processed food bear a disproportionate burden of these mismatched diseases. None of this is inevitable. Studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer populations, groups like the Hadza of Tanzania, show that people living active lives on diverse whole food diets rarely develop type 2 diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, or many of the cancers so common in industrial societies. When those same populations adopt Western diets and sedentary lifestyles, the diseases appear within a generation. The problem is not our genes. The problem is the gap between our genes and our world. The loop we need to break here is where the story lands, and where it gets urgent. We have built a civilization of extraordinary medical power. We can treat the symptoms of mismatched diseases with remarkable sophistication. Statins for cholesterol, metformin for blood sugar, surgery for herniated discs, orthodontics for crooked teeth. And these treatments matter. They reduce suffering, they extend life, but they do not fix the mismatch. They manage it. The sugar stays in the food supply. The chairs stay at the desks. The processed meals stay on the shelves. The next generation grows up in the same environment, inherits the same behaviors, and develops the same diseases. The loop closes. Dysevolution continues. Understanding this, really understanding it, changes the question we should be asking. Not just how do we treat this disease, but why does this disease exist in the first place? Not what pill fixes this, but what environment created it. 12,000 years ago, we made a bargain with agriculture. 250 years ago, we made another one with industry. Both brought extraordinary gifts. Both brought unforeseen costs. And in both cases, those costs were written into our bodies, in our teeth, our bones, our arteries, our blood sugar, our restless, sleepless nights. We are not sick because evolution failed us. We are sick because culture moved faster than evolution could follow. And if we want to live long and well, not just long, we need to start closing the gap. So we've named the problem. We made a bargain with agriculture 12,000 years ago. More food, more people, more disease, more toil. We made another bargain with industry 250 years ago. Longer lives, yes, but also longer hours of sitting, cheaper sugar, and a food system engineered to override every satiety signal our ancient brains possess. And in both cases, the body paid the price. We are living longer than any humans in history, and we are spending more of those extra years sick, not from infection, not from famine, but from the quiet, grinding consequences of a mismatch between who we are biologically and how we live culturally. We've called this dysevolution, the loop where we treat symptoms instead of causes, pass the conditions on to the next generation, and call it progress. But here's what we haven't done yet. We've looked at the big picture: farming, industrialization, the sweeping historical forces. What we haven't done is get specific. What exactly is happening inside the body? Which diseases, precisely, are products of mismatch? And which ones are simply the cost of getting old? What does modern life do to fat cells, to arteries, to bones, to immune systems, to eyes, to spines? That's what part 3 is about. We're going to zoom in from the grand arc of history into the biology of the individual body, your body, and the surprisingly specific ways that modern comfort is costing you. Some of it will be familiar, some of it will be startling, and some of it, I think, will change the way you move through your day. Because this isn't just a story about the past, it's a story about right now, about the chair you're sitting in, the shoes on your feet, the screen you're staring at, the food in your kitchen. The mismatch isn't ancient history, it's happening in your body today. Let's talk about it.